Friday, May the 15th, 2009, and we're in the home of Jim Miller for our 7th session with Carrie Daniels from the University of Louisville. And I'm going to make a statement here before we start. I want to thank Carrie. She's been my silent partner. She's really the
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right.
I can't get it from here. It's not my line. Can you just pull off
Yeah,
that?
sure, absolutely.
Either Drew will get it or the line will get it. That's Jay's phone.
Yeah, that's fine. That shows that we're
That's
alive.
the first. That's the first time that's happened.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, that's pretty amazing, really, for 14 hours.
Pretty good.
That's pretty amazing, absolutely. Well, anyway, I wanted to thank Carrie and the University of Louisville for allowing us to do this. And as I was saying, she's the brains behind the outfit. All I'm doing is blabbing and running the camera. So, and also Jim, in the great tradition of a good third baseman, you've taken a lot of hotline drives and a lot of grounders that hop the wrong way and hit the seam of the turf and all that sort of stuff. And so we really appreciate your handling my poor questions, and you're making my questions a lot better than they are by your answers. So we appreciate it very much. What I wanted to do today, Jim, is concentrate for most of the day at least on the quartet business. I'm going to assume that maybe you were attracted to the Louisville chapter in the 50s more by the quartetting than you were by the chorus. That may be wrong, and I want you to straighten us out on that as to what first attracted you to quartetting, and give us a little bit of a background on that, and then let's just go right into your quartetting experience right from the beginning.
Well, you're right you're right about the quartet thing. And one thing about you're wrong about is you're talking about your questions, and you know my feelings about you, Troy. I just can't say how much at ease you make somebody feel, and our relationship for these several years has been a delight for me.
Well, thank you.
And an educational delight, let me put it that way.
I'm a drop in the water to your ocean. Say that.
The quartet, of course, is the thing that I thought about completely. The chorus was just an afterthought, and in my early days, it was just a means to learn a little something, learn how to do it. And but the end result, not the end result, but the end that we strive for was to sing in a quartet. And it goes over back. I don't know whether in earlier interviews I talked anything about this or not, but I was around quartets for most of my life. In my early, in my pre-teens and teens, and mostly pre-teens, my mother and her sisters were singing professionally on the radio, and each one of them, of the three of them, each one of them had a boy, and we were thrown together during rehearsals when they were rehearsing, and the husbands were there, and they'd play cards in the back, and women would be rehearsing in the front part of the house, and we'd be doing mischief in the middle or somewhere along the line. But both of them, the guys, after a little while of singing, a little while of playing cards, they'd always got into singing barbershop music. And I've really thought that that's the only kind of music there was there for a while, other than instrumental music. I didn't think anything about vocal music ever being anything different than that. And I was in the military for it, found that out. And anyway, singing in a quartet was something that I just had been around an awful lot, and most of my life. And then when I was able finally to get into the society, that's what we were thinking about, was right off the bat, was to try to start singing somehow with a quartet. And it wasn't too long after I joined that I was tapped by our director, Benner, to sing. He got up a quartet with my singing tenor, And he was baritone, and a fellow by the name of Howard Bonkowski was the lead singer, and Bobby Burnett, who I know you knew, was the bass, and that was the start of it. We had a quartet, and it was called the Derby Towners, and I guess we were adequate back in those days. We qualified to go to the international a couple of times in '60 in Dallas. We went down there and it came in 21st, and out of 50, you know, right in the middle somewhere. And then in the next year, '61, we got beaten in the regionals by 1 point in the regionals, and that was a different qualification. They took the winners, and now you sing against a score. Mm-hmm. But back then they take the top 2 quartets, and we got beat by 1 point, and we're out of it in Philadelphia. That was in '61, but we qualified again in '62, and again came in 21st, something like that, and. Then, of course, a week later, our quartet was shot. That's when Benner took his fly and leaped to the moon or wherever it was. And I tell you, it's a pretty awful feeling not having a quartet. And so we struggled around for a better part of a couple of years with some substitutes. Actually qualified again to go with a couple of substitutes. In Toronto. That was in '63, but the bass singer was not at all dedicated to the quartet. As a matter of fact, right before Toronto, and it was a complete surprise to us, he said he couldn't rehearse any part of any of the last 3 weeks, the 3 weeks right before the convention. He couldn't rehearse because he went on some kind of a hunting trip or something in Montana or something like that. And we got washed pretty good on that little deal, something like 30, 32, something like that. And there was about a year in there that where you just kind of feel kind of helpless, And we finally then got together with Bob Netherton came into the fold, and we got up another quartet with the same baritone that we went to Toronto with. And did you ever know Leroy King? He was a Jeffersonville guy.
I sure heard of him. I did not know him.
Had a voice like a bird. Well, I mean, but redneck all the way through. But anyway, we did get another quartet going with Bonkowski and Netherton and Burnett and me, and I was singing baritone in that foursome. And we rehearsed for a little bit and learned some music, and was getting along. Gentry joined into the fold then, right about that time. And I don't know, it didn't quite seem to work out like we'd like for it to, and we ended up, we switched parts. And they made me the lead singer, and Bonkowski went singing baritone. And that looked like that was going to work out pretty good. And then we had just the tragedy with Bonkowski, 39 years old, and he passes away with all kinds of things. He had early, he had tuberculosis, and he was diabetic, and his kidneys, just everything happened to the guy, 39 years old, and he passed away. And it so happened that we had gained a little bit of recognition, and we're scheduled to be guests at Sage Lake. I may have explained a little bit about Sage, but it's a weekend deal in Michigan every year, and for quartets and other barbershoppers. And we were scheduled to be a guest quartet up there, and I was already a member of that group up there, but the quartet was scheduled to go up there, and we lose our baritone singer. And that's when we got a hold of Ken Buckner. And he was actually singing with another quartet at the time, but they all decided that he could do better with us, and so he came in and learned about 15 of our songs in about a 3-week period. And we appeared on that thing up there. And of course that quartet stayed together for several years. Highly competitive quartet. We won the district championship and qualified for international, and always we were, anywhere from 10 to 20 somewhere in those early years, and wasn't until, well, it was about early 70s, 72 and everything, where we really hit our stride, and where we really had a chance to win the thing.
At what point did the Derby Towners become the Citations? And when
Ken Buckner joined us, we were the Derby Towners, but then we found out, or it dawned on us, that with 2 new members from the Derby Towners, all of a sudden had 2 new members that didn't win the district championship with them.
Okay.
So we could go back into district competition if we just changed our name.
Okay.
And so that's the way that came about.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the time, the chorus, the chapter, all the quartets in the chapter were trying to take names that were related to racing and thoroughbreds and things like that. we were the Derby Towners, and then we became the Citations, and there was the Clubhouse 4, there was the Yearlings, let's see what some of the other ones were. The Yearlings, you get the idea. And so that we took the name of the Citations after the Triple Crown winner. And we became very, very successful on the show circuit. We top 10. We were a top 10 quartet, which is a pretty good echelon to be on, competitively, but there's always something in the way to make that last step, where you got to really chew up a lot of stuff to get, to really to get the gold medal, and we never were able to spend that much time at it. And the chorus was very active, very, very active at the time. And so we were a top-notch quartet, top 10 type quartet competitively, but from a show standpoint, I mean, we didn't take a backseat to anybody.
Right.
And we were as busy as any show quartet on the circuit. I mean, we were booked 20 to 25 weekends of every year. And so we logged a bunch of miles. We sang in something like, I think, 39 states and 4 of the 5 Canadian provinces. The trip to Vietnam for USO. I mean, it was a heck of a ride over the next 13, 14 years. And so, like a lot of them said, had us pegged as the best quartet maybe that never won a medal.
I've heard that many times. Some of those, let's pick out a few of those trips that you remember that have a significance for you, and let's just talk about a couple of those. Not Vietnam right now. We'll get to that one.
Yeah, I understand. Well, the thing about it is that you singing with a barbershop quartet on the show circuit was a study in contrast. You might one weekend go to Mankato, Minnesota, and there will be a 25-man chapter up there, and the show will be in the high school auditorium, seating 600 or 700 people. And I call out that name because the Afterglow was in a kind of a dance hall affair up above the A&P, And you might run into a situation like that, and then next time you turn around, you're singing at the Philadelphia Academy of Music, at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia with Afterglow at the William Penn Hotel, and it's just that study in contrast that you had. I can remember that we really felt that when you sang in that small chapter, in the stick someplace, I mean, that was the real barbershop that you were singing for. Not that the other guys weren't, but this was the backbone of things. These the guys that just looked up to you for everything you did, and he couldn't do enough for you. And while it wasn't as nice, either financially or artistically or whatever you want to call it, as it might have been, it still was the thing that we knew made up our society. And like I said, we had our share of both. We had to share of both of them. And like I said, that was kind of the norm over the 13 or 14 years that we were on the thing. I mean, millions of miles on a million airplane stories. I mean, you can't fly 25 miles times a year without having 25 things to say about air travel. And some of the things, I'm trying to think of some of the people in the chapter you might, I guess not. A couple of guys in our chapter actually flew us on charter several times.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. Ken Butte, well, you probably knew Ken Butte.
Yeah.
He was our pilot several times. He could get a little flaky up there, and, you know, but Tim Stivers, of course, was one of those pilots, and I'm trying. All of a sudden, I got a mental block on the one, but we had a ex-military guy with a bunch of hours, and he was probably the most solid of everybody that we with. I'll think of his name.
So you chartered a plane, or you had these guys? How did that?
Yeah,
work?
well, what we would do is, we would charter a plane from Kentucky Flying Service, or we had another airplane that was owned by a flying school down in Bardstown. It was a 6-place Aztec twin engine Aztec, and it was part of that, owned by this flying club down there, and it was well maintained, and we took it an awful lot of times, and quite a few times. We dealt primarily with Kentucky Flying Service over at Bowman Field, and but we would rent the plane and provide the pilot, and usually the pilot was, sympathetic to what we were going to be doing, Otherwise, if you take a regular pilot, then, you got to put him up in a hotel someplace, and he's not going to be around you, or, or anything like that. It was just better to have your own person there, but assuming that he was adequate, and all of them really were. So that was the method of travel primarily. If we were close enough, we would go by automobile, but we primarily had to fly.
What was the most unusual place you landed?
Oh my! Oh my!
I mean, I guess on purpose, I should ask.
Well, one time we were doing when you talk about landing or taking off, you always think of Huntington, West Virginia, because Huntington, West Virginia Airport is a sawed off top of a mountain, and one runway, and so you better hit the runway coming in, or if you don't hit it, you're going to be right on the side of the mountain. And on the way out, you better be flying when you get to the end of it, because it goes just like that. And that was always an adventure to go in. Lloyd Frazier was the name I was trying to think of. Okay. And I don't know whether you remember him or not, but we landed in a place in right outside of Chicago. Was it not Des Plaines, but I think I meant it at a little private airport, and the runway was a blacktop runway, but it wasn't any wider than this room. It was mostly about a driveway. I mean, the wings would go way over the edges, you had went through the wheels and everything, And this one time we were leaving. It was on a Sunday morning, and we were up all night long, you know, singing and everything. And we got in the airplane, and he's taxiing out to the end of the runway. And he had to go down there and had to turn around. And it's really narrow and everything. And down there, the runway, they had cut into the, you know, it was kind of built up on the sides of, you know, the soil, the dirt was on the side. And he was turning the airplane around. And he went a little bit too far with, he didn't go off the surface or anything, but he went over there so far that he hit the ground with the propeller.
Oh.
And the propeller hit the end of the propeller and knocked it off. And he read it up and we said, what are we going to do about that? He said, it'll be all right. So we had to come in with a broken propeller. I think there was a couple of times that I don't think we were ever in any real danger in any of these things. You always have a problem with weather and, you know, things like that. But there was one time where we really, it really didn't, it shouldn't have happened. But we were booked to sing on a Sweet Adeline show in St. Joseph, Michigan. And they had somehow or other, no, it wasn't a Sweet Adeline show. It was a men's chapter that had a Sweet Adeline quartet come in. That's the way it was. And they somehow or other got all big fight over expenses and how they handle them and everything like that. And they said that what we want to do is take care of everything. We'll take care of it. We'll send an airplane for you. And of course, we said, well, hold it. Now, wait a minute. When you said you're going to send an airplane, we just want to. We generally like to know what we're getting on or what we're going to be doing, you know. Well, he says, we're going to send you the executive aircraft from Whirlpool Corporation, which are going to come in there. And twin engine Queen Air or something like that. And so we reluctantly agreed to that part of it, that they were taking care of all the expenses. The only thing, you know, and it would include all our talent fee and everything like that. That's the background of it. Anyway, we go over to Bowman Field over here, and we're going to meet in the administration building, and I'm sitting there a little ahead of everybody else that time. Right, I just lived almost around the corner from Bowman Field, and boy, this airplane pulled up there, and it was a spick and span Queen Air. It was beautiful. And a guy gets out of it in a uniform. And he comes walking in, kind of looking around like that. And I said, "You're looking for a quartet?" And he says, "No, I'm not looking for a quartet." I'm like, he was there to pick up Dave Jones, Humana guy. He was picking him up, take him up to Firestone in Akron, play a round of golf, and was going to bring him back for somebody. But it was what. And so that kind of went out the window, and the next thing I know, here comes a guy walking up to me, and he's about 5'3", and he got kind of bushy hair, just Airwoods kind of thing, and he didn't look more than about 20 years old, and he said, "I'm looking for a quartet. And I said, "Oh yeah, okay." The other guys were there by now, and he said, "Where's your airplane?" He says, "Right over there. I'll bring it over." And it was the awfulest looking Apache that you ever saw in your life. Twin engine, but Apaches were 6-place airplanes, but they were underpowered, and you know, and it paint chipping off of it, and it was just terrible. And so he gets there, and he finally looks us guys over like that, and he says, "How much you guys weigh?" Well, you know, Butner, you know, 200 plus pounds, 210 pounds. I'm 250 at the time. You know, Myers is 250. Netherton sitting up around the 200 mark, and we had 4 suitcases and a couple boxes of records. And he says, "I don't know." He said, "I think we're going to be overweight." And I said, "Well, what are we going to do about this?" You know, he said, "Well, I'll just bring out some gas and so make some hold it." So I called up my friend over at Kentucky, and I told him. He said, "Well, it's a normal procedure." He says it's best for him, you know, to get rid of the weight than it is to, have the gas. So we said, well, okay. And so all our family, wives and kids and everything in there saying goodbye to us, And we go down the end of the river, go off on 2-4, and he takes off, and he guns that thing, and Troy, the airplane just kind of jumped up off the ground. Maybe about 10 feet off the ground, but it didn't get any higher than that. And here we are sailing by that, approaching that administration building over there, about 10 feet off the ground, right into that, onto the houses and trees and everything like that. And barely got the thing up off the ground. And then up around Shelbyville, Indiana, we run into the doggonest weather you ever saw. I mean, getting knocked around and everything like that. And we find out when he's calling into Indianapolis Center there, we find out that that guy asked him, he says, do you have a IFR ticket? And guy says, no, he was a VFR guy, and I remember the guy on the radio said, well, what in the hell are you doing up there? And it was a mess.
I bet.
And we broke out somewhere around the Michigan line up above South Bend, and we hit the ground and we're livid. I mean to tell you, we're livid, boy. And we told the guys in the chapter we didn't appreciate it one bit, and that and they said, oh well, okay. What happened was that the airplane didn't get in, and that the next day, Sunday, well, you'll be going back on the big airplane from Whirlpool, which was a plush and specially appointed DC-3. And so we were kind of placated, and everything. Anyway, we did the show, and it was a good show and everything. Came back the next day, and that DC-3 wasn't anywhere to be found. And there's the Apache sitting there, and we refused to get in it. We said, we're not getting in that airplane, and we're not getting anything that guy's in. And so they ended up taking us back to Louisville in 2 single-engine airplanes. With 3 of us were in some kind of a Cessna, and Buckner was riding solo with a pilot in a 2-place Navion. So I mean, that's kind of a typical situation. We had some bad ones though, real bad ones, mostly due to weather. We did one go to Philadelphia. Well, actually, it was to Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, and it was better to go to a suburban airport up there than it was to the main airport because they were so far apart. I mean, while we landed, we'd have about an hour and a half trip by car to get to where, so we took a charter up there. And we picked up another barbershopper up in Columbus, Ohio, who happened to be good friends with the guy in Bryn Mawr. And we did the show up there. And I noticed on the way up that Lloyd that they had called it several times. We were in bad weather, bad visibility. And a couple of times they said that he had gotten off the center line, and his altitude had varied a little bit. And that really wasn't like him at all, because. But anyway, we landed up there, did the show, came back Sunday morning, and it was still very, very bad visibility. But we were going into Ohio State Airport, and strictly under instruments, and we broke out about maybe 200 feet. It was right down around the deck, but right on the money, and dropped off our passenger up there, took off for Louisville, and everything broke loose. We lost both of the navigation radios. He had voice radio, we didn't have the navigation radios. The compass up on the dashboard was acting crazy, and we were literally lost. I mean, you couldn't see the ground. It was just really bad. And so we were sailing around, circling Bowman Field. We got there and trying to find something, and we were supposed to land on 19, and one time I saw 19 out the side of the thing. The problem with it was 19 went this way, and we crossed it like that. And every now and then we see the ground a little bit with see Bellarmine College. We saw Cave Hill Cemetery. We saw, one time I got a glimpse of the Caden Tower, and I had to look up at it. You know, and I don't mind telling you, boy, I was doing a little couple of Hail Marys and acting nutrition. I thought this might be the farm, you know. And what they ended up doing was Stanford or Louisville International stacked up all their commercial stuff coming in. And between the radio at Bowman Field and the radio at Stanford Field, they took us out and brought us in. I don't know what the procedure was, but the two radios vectored in and brought us in. And the conversation was going on was you're 1 mile from touchdown, you see the ground. No, we don't see the ground. And you got a half a mile from touchdown, you see the ground. And no, we don't see the ground. Finally, the guy said, you're almost over the field, surely you see the ground. About that time, Butner spotted one strobe light. Oh. Now that was okay, because we knew that the runway was either here or was there, you know. And then right at the last minute, Lloyd spotted the other light, and we were off of it, but all he had to do was a little zigzag, and we were on the deck. Oh, but that was, you know, really a hairy situation. And then one time, the whole chorus, we flew the chorus all the way someplace, Chicago, Detroit, Detroit, I think, on the Whale, on the Big Martin 202, and they were coming home, and couldn't do, in big thunderstorm going on, and they couldn't get on the ground at Bowman. I mean, they couldn't get the airplane down. It just wouldn't go down, you know, when they get over there, and ended up they had they stacked up everything and brought them into Bowman Field, into Stanford. And so I wasn't on that. I stayed up there. I was doing a coaching job up there, so I wasn't on that one coming back. But the guys then had to get a shuttle, come over to Bowman to get their cars and go back home. So air travel was of course, back in those days it wasn't packed up and solid like it was. Weekends you generally had plenty of empty seats that you could stretch out in. So you could write a book about your airplane experiences.
It seemed like sometimes you told me that there's a couple of occasions where maybe you didn't get paid. Any of those come to mind, that you went down under the assumption you were going to get something for it and wound up doing a little charity work?
I'll be for the life of me, I don't think I could put the pinpoint on it. Because I never knew a thing about any of the money. Netherton handled everything, and I can't remember any. I know a couple of them happened, yeah. And what are you going to do? You just. Let me relate one incident to you that took place, and it doesn't have anything to do with flying. It was with the show. And it was in Michigan, and I guess was it Flint, or anyway, it was one of those. It was up in one of those places up there, Flint, Lansing, or Battle Creek, one of those, right across I-94 up there, and so we got in up there, and we were not met at the airport by a host or anything. And we were right out at the airport. We had to take a cab into the hotel, and so we took a cab in there, and we finally got a hold of somebody, and they told us where the show was going to be and everything like that. Nobody didn't have a host assigned to us or anything. But usually, there was one guy sitting at the airport with transportation, right? And so we finally got to the show, and there was the Sharpkeepers was a Michigan quartet, and the Harmony Hounds was another Michigan quartet. Did you know our recent chapter international president Roger Lewis?
Yes.
Well, he sang with Harmony Hounds, and they were a comedy quartet, and good one too. And these three quartets were. And we found out, you know anything about what's going to happen here? And he said, no, we don't know anything. We couldn't find anybody. We couldn't find anybody. It didn't look like there was anything even going on, at that place. And finally, we did run across a guy, and we asked him what's going on. Is there a show here? Oh yeah. I said, where is everybody? And he said, well, what happens is that we sing a couple of songs, and then we go in the audience. We watch the show from that point on. And I said, well, we said, how does the show go? And he said, oh, y'all work out something. And so that's the way that thing went. We ended up making the show up. The 3 quartets made the show up. And we went out with 1, 2, and 3 in each. As you finish up your set, you would introduce the next quartet. One quartet would introduce the next quartet. And so that's what we did. And then in the second half of the show, we just reversed the order of the quartets and did the same thing. And then when it was all over with, the 3 quartets got together and sang Keep America Singing. And when it was all over, what was going to happen here, And finally, they thought that was the greatest show they had on how. They said, that was really a great show. Boy, so it shows you where some of them operated.
Absolutely.
And but they didn't miss any payments or anything. They had 600-700 people out there. They were quiet as a tune. We couldn't tell. We sounded like anybody behind that curtain. Oh my! And but there were some good ones too. I mean, big, beautiful arenas and venues. The Lyric Theater in Baltimore, and the Exposition Center in Phoenix. There was really some great places that we sang, but it was about half and half,
Yeah. Were the large arenas a performance for a chapter, or was it more of a district sort of a thing, or what?
Oh no, it was chapter. Almost all these things were chapter shows. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit. To me, it was really a big indicative thing. We were singing a show, and we were singing at the Academy of Music in Chicago. It's a beautiful venue. You just can't get over it, And not Chicago, in Philadelphia, and it's where the symphony played and everything. And so we're walking around prior to, just looking at where we were going to, exits and entrances and where the dressing rooms were. And back this one corridor, I noticed this one dressing room right kind of off the thing had a big gold plate on it. It must have been about 1 by 1.5. Big gold plate. And her Madame Rozanoff, Bunjubinsky or something. She was the premier danseuse of the ballet. And over here across, right opposite, there was another great big plate. And that over there was Joe Schmo, whatever it was. He was the concertmaster for the Philadelphia Symphony. And then right off of the stage, right there's another dressing room, had a little plate on it, just a little bitty thing, and all it said was Mr. Ormandy.
My goodness,
Boy, I thought to myself, that's class, buddy. Man, he didn't have anything, just Mr. Ormandy. Oh my heaven! And of course, he's legendary, as a conductor of the Philadelphia Symphony, and. So, I mean, those little kind of things, you never forget them. You never forget those things. And so that part of my life was actually a twofold situation at that time. During all this time, my mother became a very, very bad invalid with arthritis everywhere. I mean, her hands were like claws and her legs were gone, and she's bedridden most of the time in a wheelchair. And she was really, really bad off. And Rosemary took care of her like you just would never believe. And all at the same time of this, I was in the midst of tapping out. I went broke. I mean, big time bad broke. And actually, I don't know. Wasn't a very good time of life for Rosemary either, but everything went well. And she took care of my mother, and like I said, I could have very easily gone real off the deep end, except for the fact that once a week, I got a chance to go out of town and sing some barbershop music and have a good time, get my mind off everything, and come back in. Rosemary never had 7 days a week with her, but that was a therapy thing with me. It was something that I'm thankful for right now for, to barbershop in general and for the quartet in particular, because it was several years there. I don't even like to think about it. And so it was great therapy for me. I don't know. I don't know whether I'd have survived with just from a plain health standpoint, all the pressure that thing had, except for barbershop. So that was the meaning of quartet. Meaningful.
That's nice. I've experienced with so many barbershoppers who were ex-athletes or who were participating in something as a young person, whether it be a musical organization or athletic. And we have found in singing and in the camaraderie of a quartet or of a chorus something of what we had as athletes in earlier time. And I'm sure that was for you.
No question.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, a good many of the top-notch singing groups were staffed by guys who were competitors in some form.
Yeah.
And that gave them, they had a little something else going for them. If you want to really get down and dirty and start talking about winning,
Yeah.
There were people that you find out that the people that knew how to do it generally had some kind of a sports background or some kind of a competitive background. Yeah. And that's true.
I've often, when new men come into the Thoroughbreds, I've made the statement that I don't want to sound like I'm being elitist or anything like that, but I said, it's been my experience that the barbershopper in general, as a group, is not really a cross-section of the society. It's a cross-section of the upper part of society, because most of the men and women in barbershopping are people who have been successful in something.
Right.
I go back to our first conversation in the early days of the Louisville chapter, and you made the statement that most of those men were very well off. They were successful businessmen. They were leaders in the community.
They really were. Anybody who was anybody in Louisville was in that thing.
Yeah.
And it was founded by two millionaires, Fritzie Drybro and Ed Mall. And Drybro was into mercantile and parking lots and property and building and everything like that. And one of the big millionaires around town. And Ed Mall had the biggest laundry and 37 or 38 branches for dry cleaning and everything like that. And they had some other lesser people in income-wise, but not not very far down the line. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's really true. And you take a look at any of these groups that even right today. I think you'll find a little bit higher echelon from education and jobs, and I think that to be true. I know it was up in Cincinnati. It was. The only thing about that is it can't be really true, because rarely you ever knew what another guy did.
Well, that's true. But
had no idea what you'd been with a guy for 5-10 years. You never didn't have any idea what he did for a living.
Exactly.
And didn't care really.
Yeah.
There was a couple of things that happened to me. I can call a name because he's deceased now. But there's a fella that sang with our chapter by the name of Kelsey Wade. And he couldn't sing a lick. But we had him in the chapter and he sang. And we, after, he was in there 2 or 3 years, I guess. And his wife asked if she could see me, not on one time during the week, and she had an office or something. She asked, could I come up, and I said, well, yeah, I guess so. I don't know what it was all about, And she says, all I want to do is I want to thank you and all of the thoroughbreds for having Kelsey into in the thoroughbreds, because he's an alcoholic, and he reached a time where he was ready to fall on all the way down into the gutter, or maybe to whip it. And the fact that she and he both said singing with the thoroughbreds got him over the hill.
Oh, what a story.
And we had a sketch one time where we had to have a drunk, and oh my, could he do it? Could he do it? Mercy. And but that she went out of her way to say that he was probably saved his life, because he was that far gone alcoholic wise, and so that was kind of nice.
So we're talking about a pretty powerful medium when you talk about yourself in terms of the dark days financially and the things that you went through, and I think that music has always been that type of a thing. It's a cathartic experience as far as being able to release, and I appreciate that story and that account, because I think that's important.
Well, without getting into too much details on the thing, I was in the trucking business, a local trucking, commercial warehousing, and we started off with I must preface all this by saying that everybody that worked for me worked for my father, and my mother, from the time he started the business, and when I didn't really particularly care about the business, but he died very young, and I was out of school for not very long, and there was nothing. I'm the only child. I had to start with the business, and we were very successful. Our personnel were 95% black, and they were completely devoted to my mother, and we did very, very well. We made some money, made good money, and it wasn't until we got into the late 60s when all of a sudden some of our people started to die off, retire, and got new people coming in, and that was real demise or starting the way down for Miller Transfer Company, because I just wasn't equipped to handle personnel like that. I mean, I didn't have to. I mean, those guys were giving me 95, 96 pennies for every dollar I paid them, and I didn't have to check up on them or have them trip tickets or call in and find out and run them down and follow them around or anything like that. I just didn't have to do that. And the new people came in, I wasn't equipped for that kind of management. And so that was one of the things. I had some union problems that I wasn't even involved in, but I advised my cousin about a thing, and the union thought I was involved with something I wasn't. And I had a man to come in, drive a truck right up to our dock, backed it into the dock. I'm standing on the dock with my insurance carrier, and he backs it into the dock just as fine as you could ever do, opened up the door and fell out of it, dead drunk. And I fired him and took him to the hospital to get a breathalyzer test right away. He was a .26, and I fired him, and they started the agreements to get his job back. And that's when my attorney, we had never had a grievance before. In all the years we were in business, we never had a grievance. And when they started all this stuff, their attorneys took my attorney and just turned him inside out. And when it was all over with, we won. We won the verdict and everything. But I was well on my way to being broke on account of that.
Sure.
And there was a couple other things. And I always said I had 2 lawsuits that broke me, and I won both of them. I won them both, but they broke me. And but that was, that type of thing went on at that time. And it was my own fault, because I just wasn't used to having to do business that way. And I mean, a handshake was your bond.
Sure.
Sure. And it got so later on with the primary customers that, like I said, you go out to, primary customer was the International Harvester. You go out there and they'd say, look, can you handle a situation like this? Yeah, how much will it be? Well, it'll be this much. Okay, fine. Shake hands across the desk and that's all you needed. Now, all of a sudden their personnel started to change. And the next thing you know, their personnel are running all kinds of shenanigans and everything going on out there. We found out that we had to have a man out there almost all the time. You had to document your phone calls. You had to double check the times of when you went in the gate and out of the gate. It was just all kinds of things. And that was just when they were really changing it, you know, at that. And anyway, we went out of it at the time. Just had to pass out.
About what year is that, Jim?
Well, I think the last, we actually shut it down in late 71.
Okay.
And then one of the customers that we had called up Rosemary after a couple of years and called Rosemary and asked her, said, we're not pleased at all what kind of service we're getting and one thing or another, could you possibly handle our account? And she says, well, I'll say something to Jim. She said, no, wait a minute. We don't want to talk to Jim at all. We don't want him involved. We're talking to you. Anyway, we had some trailers, still had some trailers, but they ended up financing her for another prime mover for a tractor and used our trailers. And she operated about 2 or 3 years. And we did okay. And it finally got to where they decided that when some of the freedom of opened up, when they started deregulating a lot of the things route-wise and permit-wise and everything, they could have their own equipment and didn't have to operate on our rights or anything. And so she finally shut that down. By that time, I was starting into photography, and I was shooting pictures of anything that I could make a buck on, I ran into one of my football players. This was in early 70s, 71, 72, something like that. And he was coaching a little league football team out here in St. Matthews. And he said, hey, coach, he says, can you take a picture of my football team? And I did have a camera left around, and I said, well, what's the matter? I said, don't the league take photographs? He said, yeah, they take them. And he said, but it's got so nasty to deal with, we just kind of thought we'd have our own done. And so anyway, I took a picture of his football team and ended up doing the whole league. And first couple of years, one of the things I did was run around photographing teams, little league teams or anything I could. And it went on for, we were getting along pretty good here and there and yon and everything. And then finally, in 77 or 76, 77, they had some problems. We had some problems with our quartet pictures, and Bob Johnson said to me, "Why don't you think about it?" I said, "Oh, gee, I don't know whether I'm equipped to do anything like that, Bob." And he says, "Well, I know." He said, "Let me fill you in what the problem is." He said, "They can get everybody to take pictures of the revenue producing stuff, take pictures of the quartets and the choruses. They can get plenty of people to do that, but they can't get anybody to shoot the activities." And the activities back in those days were really important to a guy named Leo Fobart, who was the editor of the Harmonizer. I mean, he'd have at the convention, he'd have photographs from Monday and from Tuesday and and he had all kinds of things like that going. And he said, if you could cover something like that. Anyway, I talked to Leo Fobart about it, and then we got the account, and that's the first corporate account we had. And I said to him, you set up the program, and I'll decide whether or not we can handle it that way or not, the bookwork and everything. And he said, well, this is the way we like to do it. And I looked at it and I said, well, we can do it. And that was the first one. It was in 1978. And we're still doing it.
Still doing it, yeah.
We're coming up on, 30-something?
31 years.
31 years, and we're still doing it.
Now, when did you begin taking the competition photos and
in
stuff?
'78.
That was all started at the same
Yeah,
time?
at the same
Okay.
time.
So you got the whole...
Yeah, we
whole
got the
shebang?
whole thing because we said we would do the activities.
Okay.
And it's been an adventure and a problem, and I don't know how much longer they're going to do it really, because there's just things that are happening that, well, it's another story. I don't really know all the things happening, but things are happening that might make it just not feasible for us to continue.
Did you, in years when the thoroughbreds were competing, how did you handle the picture business? How did you do
I had an employee that would go with us and until well, I don't know exactly when it was, until when Kathy was able to take over. Kathy was at Western University. I got to tell you about that very first night. That very first convention was in Cincinnati, and that was a big thing for us. That's when we really romped, and we were doing the quartets. And the way you do it, they have all 50 quartets all in the quarterfinals, and you photograph all 50 of them, and right after they sing, and then after that they dropped off. You don't do or back then you didn't do the semifinals or the finals, because you already had them in one thing. And so it was on a Thursday night, and we were doing all the quartets, and Kathy was helping me, getting them lined up and checking their ties and everything, getting them posed. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and I never forget it, she flopped down in the chair like this, and she said, "Pop, I can't do another one. They only have one more to do." She said, "I can't do another one. I don't care if the Pope walks in. I just can't handle it anymore." So she, and about that time, in walks a quartet, and it was 4 young guys dressed in lemon-colored tuxedos. All of them handsome as the devil, come walking in that door to have their photograph made like that, and bam, man, she's up out of the chair like a shot. And one of them was Jay.
Well, what about that?
One of them was Jay, and that's the way she met him. And Jay wasn't the most forward of that group. I mean, one other one was really on the skates after Kathy, but Jay was kind of in the background. But anyway, that's the way they met. And then where they really started getting things settled was it was it's around '81, I guess. We were singing a district in South Bend, and Jay was judging. And anyway, we sang in that contest, and Kathy was with the thoroughbred had a group of thoroughbred kids that teenagers and everything, and they were really a clan, And Kathy was at this place it was at Big Holodome, I think it in Columbus. I don't know, maybe it was Columbus. And they were all over dancing around and everything, and ended up Kathy and Jay kind of cut out from the group there and started sitting in that around the swimming pool and everything like that. And Rosemary all night long just peeking at them, and not home yet. Dinner, she's not in yet. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, and they were just sitting out there in the middle, And he used to get so mad at me, man. I'm there knocked out. I wasn't worried, and she. But anyway, that's the way it's been, and that's been a fine thing. Yeah, so barbershop has been just almost any phase of my life from the time I was 36, 37 years old. It's been it's been locked up to it. I gave up everything. I gave up playing golf and everything on account of it. Yeah, but Troy, I think everybody, almost everybody, let me put that, somewhere back in their genes someplace, has got the idea that, when they see a show going on, whether it's acting or whether it's singing or whether it's public speaking or whatever it is where you get up and perform, I think everybody has got a little bit in their thinking, I believe I could do that. And, and possibly they could do it, But in my case, I really thought that I think I can make it, and doing clubs and one thing, I believe I could do it. But in my particular case, I wasn't willing to do the thing. I didn't want to do it so badly that I wanted to give up the things that I wanted more. A family, living it, in a nice home, not, in show business, you're traveling all the time, you don't have we know what the situation is. And the price, that price was too high for me to pay. But then see what happened was that with barbershop, I was getting the best of both worlds. I still had a job, a family, and the kids, and all that home life and everything like that. But on a weekend, for 24 or 36 hours, on a week, I could be on the stage.
Boy,
You see what that when people talk about what quartetting means, that's what it meant to me, and when you have a little bit of success, that's a lot better.
absolutely.
But
Great.
anyway,
Only place you can get a standing ovation at our age, and that.
yeah, I guess you're right.
Okay, let's hold up on that.